In this video, I'm going to be focusing on how do we actually find primary sources, resources online, and I'm going to be going through some of my favorite websites to use, namely Newsela and Beyond the Bubble. I'm also going to be talking a little bit about how do you find resources if, those favorite lists that you might have, like I do, if they don't work out for you. Like, how can you actually go to Google and find materials for some of these topics that we teach that we know are important, but because of the fact that they're unique or they're niche, sometimes we can't find those materials. So that's what this video is going to cover, and it's actually going to be our last video, so let's go ahead and get into it. Newsela is a wonderful site for a variety of reasons, and we're going to go over them right now. First, we can see here that they have latest content, and they're constantly updating this with articles that should relate to students. We can see some of those articles here too, where we have, superheroes, we have something about COVID-19, looks like maybe White House Easter egg rolls, maybe that has something to do with Easter, and we have sports right here too. And so we can see that the latest content is indeed the latest, and it's tailored in a way where students should be interested in what the articles talk about. Along with these latest content articles, there's also a really good search function, so we're going to do that right now. We're going to go in here and type in one of our keywords to our lesson, and specifically our very first part, Oceti-Sakowin. And I did this earlier, and I was kind of curious if I would get any hits, because Oceti-Sakowin's a pretty specific term, and I was really happy to see that there are two articles. They are the same article, one's in Spanish, one's in English, but we do see that by just typing in some of our keywords, we do get something. And this is an example of what you can do. You could click into this article, and you could choose this article as something that you could actually give to your students as part of the lesson plan that we've been building over the last set of 4 videos. Now you have to decide whether or not this article actually fits with what you would like to do. So this specific article is about the Dakota Access Pipeline, which is a current event, and you certainly could work that into the lesson plan that we're working on. But if you remember, our lesson plan really focuses on the Oceti-Sakowin and really American Indigenous after the Civil War. And so just because I know that, I'm going to type in a different word that I know has a lot of connotation with that time period, the word assimilation. And my guess was accurate. I see that there are some articles about American Indians. So we see here Native Americans and freedom of religion. We have here even a Canadian version for schooling for Indigenous called cultural genocide. If you're doing a world history class, that could be a good one to include. Here too we have a short history of the U.S. government's relationship with Native Americans. And so if we keep scrolling down, we see that there are others ones too. So let's go ahead and click on one of them. I'm going to go into why Newsela really is one of my favorite places to get good articles. So first, you can see that there's a few functions here. You can print these articles out. You can have them read aloud to students, which is a very powerful scaffold that we can give to some of our students who need that extra assistance. You can also present them. You can share them too. So if you use Google Classroom or Canvas, any other kind of management software to help you, give out things to students, very powerful tool here too. And all of this is really beneficial. Now, going into some more things that it can do, we have here activities. And we can see if we click on right, there is a prompt that it automatically gives us. So the Newsela team creators have already created some good prompts and activities that we could potentially use. And this one is, write a short paragraph that explains the central idea of the article. Use at least 2 details from the article to support your response. Pretty, standard activity that we could give to students. And what I would suggest doing is take activities like that, put them into the unit plan, and then start back where we kind of did in the very first video, where we look at the standards, we look at the C3 framework, and we make adjustments to this activity. That way it fits exactly what we would like it to do. And if we keep going, let's see. Let's get away from writing. Here we go. There's a quiz too, so if you would like to do a reading check with the students, you can assign that as well. And you can also print these out. So that's the activity section, which I really do like. It is very helpful. Now going on to my favorite part about Newsela is this, that you can change the Lexile levels, which basically means you can change the reading the reading level of the actual article itself. So you can tailor these articles to students based off their reading levels. So if you're teaching 3rd grade, for example, you can bring it down to 3rd grade level. If you're teaching 8th graders, yet you have a group of 8th graders who have a very high reading level, then you can give them a very special, you could raise that Lexile level up to max, and you can give them a different reading level than what their peers get. It tells you exactly where the information comes from. It tells you the word count. It says upper elementary to high school. That's not for the exact reading level. That's just the article in general. So if I raise it down to, or lowered it down to English 550, we see it's now text level 3. So we're now upper elementary school. So third and fourth graders should be able to read this without too many problems. And if we raise it back up to max, we can see it's now changed to level 12, and now this is for the high school students. Now, along with changing the Lexile level, there's one really good tool, or there's one last good tool that I like about this, is you can turn it into Spanish. Most of the articles in Newsela, especially the more recent ones, do have a Spanish version, so if we scroll down, we see the text has changed. And I like this a lot because I do believe it represents what is happening in the country, where we're seeing a lot more ELL students coming into our classrooms. And if we can present them with tools in order to help them feel acclimated, help them learn, all the better, in my opinion. I had ELL students when I was teaching 8th grade history, and what I would do is I would print both the English version and the Spanish version, and I would have them work from both copies. And that gave me the opportunity to see what they could do with the English language, but then they would have that support, that scaffold, just in case they needed it. So that was Newsela. It is one of my favorite places to get articles and materials because you can change the language, you can change the Lexile level, and it also comes with a few suggestions for activities. And as a busy teacher, it's really important that we have resources like that. And if we go down here, we're back in our lesson plan. If we scroll down past all the work we've done so far, we can see that we have a place here to dump resources. And I could use Newsela article and I could replace any of these. I could add one if I'd like to, especially if I want to, provide students with a scaffold. Say, for example, you have students who really do need that reading assistance. They need something read to them. They need a lower Lexile level, or they need something in Spanish. You have the resources where you could actually, modify these or place them or just add. All of that would be beneficial. And I would then even say, too, you need to look at the actual performance tasks that we have and ask yourself, is the article, the material, going to actually help them? As we can see here, we have review the following sources and identify ways in which Oceti-Sakowin culture, including their names, was taken away as part of the U.S. assimilation efforts, and the ways that the Oceti-Sakowin resisted against their culture being taken away. Organize your findings into the T-chart. So earlier we made a T-chart here, and the staging the supporting question, and we're just going to be adding to it in this formative performance task. Now, I think you can make an argument to use either one of those articles that we found and put them either, here in the featured sources area. That first article we looked at was about the Dakota Access Pipeline, which is a current event. And there were other articles, the one we actually went into was historical, and there were other ones too. And, I think it really depends on the standards that you're working with. And if you remember, we have history standards that we want to work with, especially this one down here. It says Native Americans after the Civil War. Here's one of those other numbers again. And we do want to make sure that we are respecting and honoring that historical standard. If we wanted to focus on current events, primarily, we definitely could, but if you do remember from the last videos, the only part of our unit plan that really gets into the Oceti-Sakowin in history is this first part. The second part focuses on Australia, and the third part focuses on Guatemala, which both are more current events. And so I think because of that, part one, I would definitely make sure to include a historical article instead. So you would put them down here, either in source A, B, or C, or you could add, source D, and that would be fine too. Something I haven't mentioned about Newsela yet that I really like about it is just the ability to find almost any article that you actually need. Newsela is constantly being added to, especially with the current events, and they have a lot of different writers who are helping with it. So it's really simple normally to find things that you need. However, we know as teachers that say that we want to teach something very specific, it can be really hard to find things. And so I wanted to actually share a few of the resources that I use in order to find primary sources and lesson plans. And then after that, I'm going to even talk about how you can just do a simple Google search in order to find more sources that will help you find that really niche topic that you're working with. So we're back on the Google Doc that I'm going to share with everybody, the same one that has, all the work that we've done before, as you can see up here. And we're going to scroll back down to where it says where to get primary and secondary sources. And I really wanted to include this list because I know when I was first starting to teach, and even well after I was into my practice, it was always hard for me to find information and resources that I knew were credible, because it takes a long time to figure those things out. And not that I'm saying that you should automatically trust me and think that these things are the gold standard. You should do your own research as well. However, these are the ones that I did use in my own teaching. I built many lessons around these things. And so for me anyway, this is my go-to list. And remember, like after I show you this go-to list, I'm also going to show you exactly where or how to find other information. So you see there's a long list. These might contain some words or some titles that you've seen before. I try to really focus on the ones that are the most helpful to me. There are others out there, so you might be thinking, why is something here missing when it's obvious? Again, these are my go-tos. So I'm going to click on one of them. I would love to have time to go through them all. My only recommendation is you yourself should go through these and find the materials. I think my favorite thing about this list is a lot of them do contain lesson plans, complete full lesson plans that you just grab and take. And kind of like what we've done with these videos, take the lesson plans, find standards, and improve the lesson plan. Make the lesson plan truly yours, something that works with your students in the cultures and the place and the time that you're actually working with your students in. I'm just going to go ahead and click on one of them. This is probably one of the more popular ones that people know about. It's from the Stanford History Education Group, SHEG for short. And they created a thing called Beyond the Bubble, which really focuses on what they call, primary source lesson plans or thinking with inquiry or historical thinking. All of that stuff kind of is synonymous among these historical thinking groups. And some really cool things about SHEG and Beyond the Bubble is they've organized them based off historical skills. So you see contextualization, sourcing, corroboration, use of evidence, periodization's a newer one. They even tell you the number of how many are in each. And so if you click on View Assessment, you see that it's going to give you a short little blurb of what this is about, and they have a lot of materials. Now, another great thing about Beyond the Bubble is they're similar to Newsela in the sense that they are constantly adding things. When I was first starting to teach, back in the early 2010s, this was not all here. There were a handful of these things. In fact, I think it was just the assessment and the rubric. It did not include all of these different mini lessons. And they didn't include videos either. So they're including quite a bit of work here that you can use, which is great. If you go back, which I'm not sure if I can go back when I'm in full screen. I can just go to History Assessments. There we go. You'll see that there's quite a few more. And they also have other materials too. Like they have a project called Reading Like a Historian, and they have a new project called Civic Online Reasoning. So if you're teaching civics or want to use some civic standards, you're more than welcome to explore those too. Now remember, Beyond the Bubble from the SHEG group and Newsela, that is two of many different resources that I'm going to give you in that Google Doc. And these are my go-tos. These are the places I tend to go to first when I'm looking for information. Now, during my practice and even now when I'm building these things up, I do try to find resources in these organizations and institutional websites, and oftentimes I can't find things because I often want to teach about topics that are unique and they're original. A lot of times students want to talk about things that are happening in their world, their culture, their time and place, and so we can't really expect these organizations and institutions to have every single thing we need. That's why I said earlier, if you wanted to use the Dakota Access Pipeline resource into your lesson, even though it doesn't perfectly fit, I could see the argument for it, and I would even encourage you to try to make it fit, especially if students are interested in it. However, we do need to have specific resources sometimes, and so what I would like to do next is I'm going to show you just my process on how I go on Google and how I find primary sources and secondary sources. And honestly, when I built this lesson plan originally, that's exactly what I did, because all the go-to websites that I have, they didn't work out for me. So I had to go to Google and find these different things. And so I'm going to go ahead and show you how to do that right now. Before we head over to Google, I wanted to quickly remind you what we're looking for. So we're focusing on this formative performance task. I've already read it out loud, but here it is again. And we already have some featured sources. And luckily for us, even after all that editing we did, if you actually click into these sources, I think they still work really well, which is a good thing sometimes. Sometimes you have to completely rehaul all the sources you have because you realize once reading them that they have nothing to do with your formative performance task. So we got lucky that all three do a really good job. And so I'm going to basically just show you how I found these original three sources, what I type in, how I hunt for things, and really what we're looking for when we are doing those searches. Okay, so here we are at the Google search I just did. It's called the Oceti-Sakowin Assimilation Primary Sources, and this really does represent what I try a lot when it comes to my first searches. I type in keywords that really are related to what I'm looking for, so we're looking for things about the Oceti-Sakowin people. I also typed in the word assimilation because that's really what we're talking about when we talk about the marginalization, the discrimination of the Oceti-Sakowin. That word assimilation really is helpful. Now I could also change that word assimilation if I want to go back and type in resistance instead. I'm going to get maybe the same sources, different sets of sources, but the point is I'm going to find information that likely is going to be helpful. Now, Google doesn't always give us the resources that we need. Sometimes it gives us or sends us to articles that don't seem very scholarly, or we're not 100% sure if we should trust them, and that can be really hard for a teacher, but certainly students to figure out. What I tend to tell people is if you go to websites and they are hosted by a museum, by a cultural heritage center, by any kind of library, archive, sometimes schools and colleges and universities, they'll host their own. They tend to be pretty good. You can even go to the About section and check things out. And behind me, you can see that I found one. It's a cultural heritage center. I'm actually pretty familiar with this group. I used them quite a bit, actually, when I was teaching in South Dakota myself. And if we scroll down, we'll see there's different materials here. And I've already read through this, and so I'm not going to try to figure it out in front of you. But I read through it, and it's not necessarily helping with what I'm looking for when it comes to our actual lesson plan. But thankfully, they have a search bar, and so we can type in different things in here and hopefully find something. Now, after doing some digging off camera using the search function, I did find a website that I think will be very beneficial for our students. Here it is right here. It's talking about the actual renaming of an Oceti-Sakowin gentleman known as Dr. Charles A. Eastman. And if I continue to scroll down, not only does it provide his original name and demonstrates his culture, if we keep scrolling down, there's additional information. Talks about the wife that he married. Talks about also some outside links that we can incorporate too. And so this is an example of an article that we can actually use and plug right into our unit plan. It's short too, which is really nice. Students shouldn't struggle with this too much. And so we have something here that can actually work for us. And we only found this website, so remember, we went into Google and we just typed in Oceti-Sakowin assimilation, and then we typed in that key phrase, primary sources. That oftentimes gets us to places like museums, archives, libraries that we really want and need. And now we have an article and a resource that our students can be able to use. All right, so one last visit to our lesson plan. We see here that I actually already plugged in Dr. Charles A. Eastman, and I actually put in the other information too for the other two sources that I found. Now, I would love to spend more time showing you how I got those. I think it is helpful to see modeling, but hopefully seeing that one example is enough to show you exactly how to go to Google, type in some keywords, type in that term primary sources, and then remember, look for museums, libraries, archives. Those are the places where you're oftentimes going to get the best information. And that's it. We actually got through the entire thing. You notice that part 2 and part 3 are already filled in and filled out. You'll have these as an example. And we already finished our inquiry-based argument because that's one of the first things we did. So if we scroll up, we now have a complete unit plan, something that can actually stretch across an entire week or 2 weeks. So hopefully this was instructive. Let's head back to the library one more time, and I'll say goodbye. All right, that concludes our video series together, and it was very fun for me to be able to look through an old lesson plan that I created and make it better. I think I originally wanted to do that because I wanted to show everyone that even though I do this for a living, I've been teaching for a long time, it doesn't matter. I can still make things better, and it's a process. This took me hours to do, and I don't tell you that to freak you out or think that, oh wow, this is something that won't actually be useful. It's something that you really should try to do, throughout the year, but be knowledgeable about, at least about yourself. Like, how many minutes or hours do you actually have to do something like this? Some, final pieces of advice I could give: partner with someone. It's always easier to work with somebody. If you have a teacher that teaches the exact same classes or discipline as you, work with them. If you have a department, work with each other. Maybe you can make some things that are vertically aligned across the years that, and think of that unit plan idea, they repeat these things in the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, and then going into high school, they can repeat something again. Work with other disciplines. In our lesson plan, we had an English standard. So work with those ELA teachers. They're going to love the fact that you have students doing writing, and if you can help them improve those kids, ability to make arguments, they're going to love you even more. And finally, if you're coming to the workshops that we're going to host here at the end of April, cannot wait to meet you. Please bring in materials. We would love to be working with you over the materials that you're actually going to be using, either this year if you're going to continue teaching into May and June, or next year. We would be very excited to be working with you over real things. If you need to contact me for anything, please do so. You'll have access to my email, or you can contact Melinda Johnson. She is the social studies specialist that works in the Department of Education in South Dakota. So that is finally it from me. Thank you so much for attending these videos and watching. I cannot wait to meet many of you. Take care.